Happy Friday, Brain Scratchers. It's me, John Lorton, and we're back with another mystery. If anyone knows the producers of Making a Murderer, I think we just found your sequel. Today we're going to be discussing the case of Tair Rada. And this case takes place in Israel, so let me just apologize in advance if I get any of these pronunciations wrong. Also, I have to send out a huge thank you to my BrainScratch research assistant on this case, Crazy Cat Lady. She did a phenomenal job of diving into this case, sending me a bunch of great information. And what was really unique and challenging about this case is that so much of the information is not available in English. And that's part of the passion that drove her to reach out to me and to do all this work to make this episode happen. So thank you so much to Crazy Cat Lady, and I'm sure the family of Tair appreciates all of your work in all of the transcribing that you've done. We're going to start by taking a look at this slideshow, which was actually put together by Crazy Cat Lady. Here we have a very sweet picture of Tair Rada with her birthday, January 4th, 1993, and unfortunately she died December 6th, 2006, and unfortunately she was killed at school, which is extremely tragic. This is showing the area of Katzrin in Golan Heights, Israel, and this is where the school was located. The school is called Nofey Golan High School, and can you imagine if the Wikipedia on your high school read like this? Nofey Golan High School was founded in 1985 in Katzrin, Golan Heights. The school is the only high school in Katzrin and the main high school in the whole Golan Heights region. Even though it is the main school in the Golan Heights, it only has about 600 students. Nofey Golan's principal is Ofra Stein. Then the next section on their Wikipedia page, Murder of Tair Rada. In a brutal and apparently motiveless slaying that shocked the country, Rada, 13, was stabbed to death in 2006 in a bathroom stall in the Nofey Golan High School where she studied in Katzrin. In 2010, 4 years after the slaying, 32-year-old Roman Zadarov, a repair contractor at the school, was found guilty of Rada's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Rada's parents argued that their daughter's murder occurred as a result of negligence after the school and local authorities hired contract workers, including Zadorov, without carrying out any prior checks on them. Those workers were then permitted to come into close contact with school children. According to the indictment, on the day of Rada's murder, Zadorov left the school cellar where he was laying a new floor and came across Rada on a stairwell leading to a bathroom. Zadorov followed Rada into the bathroom, and as she tried to close the stall door, he pushed it open and slit her throat. He then slashed her chest and arms before locking the bathroom from the inside and climbing out over Rada's body. He then climbed out of a window to flee the scene. I know it's a terrible crime, but fortunately or unfortunately, this is nowhere near the end of the story, and this depiction as told by Wikipedia is hardly complete. There's a lot of other pieces at play here, and we're going to touch upon some of them. But back to the slideshow from Crazy Cat Lady. This is the front of Nofey Golan Regional High School, and apparently, even though it's being called a high school, she was an 8th grader, so I'm not sure what year you start attending high school in Israel, but she was an 8th grader, and apparently she had gone to a floor and used a bathroom that was primarily for the 10th graders. The 10th graders were apparently all out on a field trip that day, so I don't know if that bathroom was as occupied as it normally would be. She was apparently potentially skipping class, skipping a period to do this, and from what I've researched, I believe one of the 9th grade levels was also didn't have a class at this time, so there is some potential for other students to have been around. And as a matter of fact, a few other students were interviewed that had been in the bathroom around the time of this supposed slaying, and there is very curious information about them as well. I'm not going to go into it too deeply in this video because we're going to cover so much. I don't want it to go on forever, but just know that the typical rumor mill and churn and burn of stories is almost endless around this case. It is worth noting that she was having some kind of issue with her social structure. Her mom even noted that her friends seemed to all pull away from her about a week before this happened. So one of the potential theories that's kicking around is that students might have banded together to abuse her in some way. Maybe this is the outcome of that, but it's very hard to tell, and it's certainly far from conclusive. December 6, 2006, around 1300, 1 p.m., Tair decides to skip 7th period and sits in a pergola in the school's yard with a friend named Shai Yifra. Shai said Tair told her she was thirsty and decided to go to the water fountain inside the school building. She passed through this hallway. She was then seen by 2 male students sitting on this bench to the right here, and they're pointing in the direction that she essentially came up this little flight of stairs and continued walking. It's worth noting that the person that they have convicted for this crime, according to his testimony, he was following her, and he was literally 2 steps behind her as she's going up some of these stairs. So just right off the bat, I'm a little curious about how those 2 male students didn't notice that she was potentially being followed. At least they didn't comment on noticing it. What is assumed to have happened next is she went into the girls' bathroom. Here's a picture of the bathroom. And apparently the center stall, stall number 2, is where it happened. Autopsy findings suggest that what happened next, the exact order is not known, is that she was held back by her hair, struck in the back of her head at least 7 times. She suffered multiple cuts, including 2 to her chest, 2 to her chin, several to her hands, and her throat was slashed twice. Also worth noting, there was a cut across one of her wrists that they believe happened post-mortem because it did not appear to bleed. Here's kind of a simple drawing just showing where the injuries were. It's noting once again she had been pulled by the back of her hair, struck in the back of the head at least 7 times, cut on the chin, 2 slits on the throat, slash across her chest, and a slash down her chest. This really strikes me. You know, one of the things they look for in murders that we hear about a lot is passion killings. You know, it's one thing to kill a person by slitting them in the throat. It's another thing to kill a person by bashing their head 7 times, slitting their throat twice, slitting their wrists, slitting their chin, slitting them down the center of their body like that. It just appears to me that this is someone that likely had a history with her and some kind of rage aggression towards her specifically. Now, I guess you could also theorize that this is someone that is acting out something that they feel for someone else. For example, you know, if some guy has his wife leave him and he has this fit of rage, maybe he portrayed that Tair was that person in those moments of rage. But I don't know, I kind of find it tough to believe, particularly when you think about the slice across the wrist that was done post-mortem. That in my mind seems to suggest that it was a finishing move, something to make sure that we definitely got her, she is definitely not coming back, just to make sure, slash her wrist critically. Probably should have gave you just a little bit of a warning. There are some photos in here that do have some of her blood, but I'm basically omitting, you know, Crazy Cat Lady was able to find a lot of photos of the crime scene, and they are extremely gruesome. So I've actually cut those out. That's why I showed you the depiction that I did just now instead of actual photos of her body. But what's most important to know is she was placed in stall number 2 and put on the toilet with the toilet seat down. She was kind of laid on the toilet in that area. Bloody shoe prints found on the floor, the toilet seat lid, the toilet tank, and the wall partition between stalls number 2 and 3 suggest it was the killer's escape path after locking stall number 2 from the inside. The outer lock was broken. And I've seen pictures of this broken outer lock, and basically the locking mechanism has a flat edge in it so that you could use almost a screwdriver to unlock these from the outside. And the one for stall number 2 does look very damaged. However, I'm not totally convinced that it would have been too broken for some tool to still be able to open and unlock it. That being said, from everything I've reviewed, it seems like that was the case, because I believe even when they found her that someone had to go up over the top to unlock it. But I have a bit of a question mark in my mind about that. Having failed to come home that afternoon, Tair's mother began making frantic calls to family and friends, and after discovering Tair failed to come to her dance class, her mother notified police. A search throughout Katzrin began. At around 1900 or 7 p.m., Tair's body was discovered in the school's bathroom. And all of Katzrin attended the funeral, including Tair's family and her schoolmates. Here is a picture of her father, her mother, 2 of her brothers. Extremely heartbreaking photo. The police's first estimate was that violence between teens was the cause of the murder. Katzrin was known to have many violence, prostitution, and drug-related crime, even among the town's youth. Nofey Golan Regional High School was also known to suffer from student violence often. Police began questioning dozens of students and staff while investigating different leads at the same time. The very night the body was discovered, police arrested a homeless man from Katzrin who was released 5 days later when his alibi checked out. Soon after, police arrested the school's gardener, who was also released 2 days later after his alibi checked out as well. On December 11th, Roman Zadarov, a construction worker doing flooring work at the school's bomb shelter, was arrested. And there's our first picture of Roman. Crazy Cat Lady also put together a timeline. We're going to review that real quick here. On December 6th, we have the body being discovered. On December 11th, Zadorov is arrested. Then on December 19th, he apparently breaks down and admits that he did the crime. Now, in some of the research I've done, they said it was 6 days. This is looking more like 8 days, but essentially he was incarcerated and being interviewed very intensively for what appears to be the better part or possibly even a full week. And some of the information I've reviewed on this talks about the psychological repercussions, what can happen to a person when they're being put in a situation like that. And in many cases, these can elicit false confessions. So that's one of the questions in this case is this confession really valid or not? As a matter of fact, on December 20th, Zadarov recants his statement. So essentially, right the day after he admits to doing this, he then says that he did not do it. It's also worth noting that they used an informant they had put in the cell with him, and apparently they offered to pay this guy money to extract information from Zadarov. I don't know if that would even be legal or feasible in the US, but of course we're talking about a different justice system here. And when you consider a situation like that, you also have to think of the possibility that the informant could be feeding details to Zadarov about how the crime occurred. It wouldn't be very difficult for the informant to suggest, oh, so you killed this girl, what'd you do? Then you jumped over the stall. There is nothing to say that an informant is trained in the same manner as a police investigator. And if any of you have watched Making a Murderer out there, you know that police investigators already have a tendency to be sloppy in terms of leading the evidence that they're going after and the testimony of someone that's being questioned. So it coming from an informant, once again, just highly suspect to me. December 25th, Rada family requests to add a private investigator on their behalf to the investigation, and the court dismisses the request. January 18th, an indictment is submitted to the court against Zadorov for murder and obstruction of justice. February 8th, 2007, the trial begins. People start making up theories about who the real killers are. April 22nd, 2007, petitions the Supreme Court to reopen the investigation due to leads and evidence that remain unexamined. And she notes there is a lot left unexamined. And after reviewing all of her information, I highly agree with her. There's a lot of areas they didn't look into. It appears that the investigation got severe tunnel vision, especially once they had this confession, potentially false confession. And it almost seems like they tried to make the crime and the evidence, which was extremely thin, fit the confession that they had, instead of having the evidence speak for itself and either support or refute that confession. In September 14th, 2010, a court convicts Zadorov in a unanimous decision of 3 judges. In November of 2012, the Supreme Court orders a retrial for re-examination of the shoe prints. We're going to get into that a bit later, and the type of knife wound. On June 13th, Dr. Maya Foreman of the Abu Kabir Pathological Institute testifies that the knife wound was made by a serrated blade. This comes into question because due to the story that they heard from Zadarov, he had used a box cutter that is a very clean and simple blade. It is not serrated, there's no ridges on it. So these wounds are now not consistent. According to this expert, the wounds are not consistent with the story that the police have laid out of this crime. That being said, it looks like that information gets essentially squashed by the Supreme Court, and that doctor in particular is not held in such high regard in their work anymore. I don't know if this is the doctor, but I did hear that one of these experts is actually denied a promotion at some point later, and they believe it's because of the stance that they tried to take in this case. Here we have another piece of information. William Bodziak, who is an expert that testified in the OJ trial and has also literally written a book that is seen as one of the Bibles in identifying shoe prints. He looks over the shoe print evidence, which was one of the main pieces of evidence that helped convict Zadarov, and he says that the shoe print evidence is completely inconclusive. The prints that they identify as shoe prints that are on the pants of Tair, he says that you can't identify them as shoe prints. And even if you could, there's no way to tell that those are shoe prints specifically from Zadarov's shoes. February 24th, 2014, a court convicts Zadarov a second time, practically ignoring the two expert opinions. And on December 23rd, 2015, a court convicts Zadarov a third time. This time it is 2-to-1 judges. So this is the first time that one of the judges actually seems to change opinion and thinks that there is enough probable cause or cause for doubt in this case. Here's a pretty recent picture of Zadarov. Controversy over case leads to public battle royale in justice ministry. We're going to jump to the center of the article here. The case captivated the media and public. It was a tragic small-town murder that from the beginning was dogged by rumors, including that local teenagers had killed Rada and the town or teachers had covered it up, finding an easy fall guy in Zadarov, an immigrant from the former Soviet Union. He was sentenced by the Nazareth District Court to life in prison plus 2 years for obstruction of justice. But it turned out this was just the beginning of the story. In March 2013, the Supreme Court ordered the lower court to re-examine certain evidence, including a forensic expert's opinion, a former top FBI official about bloody shoe prints found at the scene, and another expert's analysis of the murder weapon and the injuries to Rada's head. The new evidence had indicated that the bloody shoe prints, which the lower court had connected with Zadarov, were not shoe prints at all. It then also goes into the information about the serrated knife, which I've already told you. The lower court chided the defense on the shoe prints issue, preferring the prosecution's expert's take and expressing disapproval of the defense expert's evasive answers under cross-examination. Zadarov's lawyers, including renowned lawyer Avigdor Feldman and Elkanah List, slammed the state and the lower court for ignoring that another high-ranking government expert came out against the state's forensic conclusions. And that's just a tiny sample of what happened. Apparently, this has rippled in the public. A Facebook group was started, had tens of thousands of followers, and someone started posting about the corrupt police or the corrupt investigators in this, and apparently the post was liked 1,000 times before the whole page was taken down. So there definitely seems to be an element of not of information being squashed necessarily, but of people not being able to share their true opinions about this case. I think it's also worth noting that Tair's mother also does not believe that this conviction is accurate. She does not think that Zadarov is the culprit, and she believes that the murderer is still running around free. That being said, Tair's father did think that the prosecution's story seemed to be credible. So even within family, you've got conflicting theories and opinions about what happened in this case from two people that are, I mean, how much closer could you be than it's your child that was murdered in this way? Crazy Cat Lady also sent me this article by Adina Kutnicki, and essentially this is a very good look at the key evidence that was presented in court Adina has a bit of experience with criminal investigations, and she is, I believe she's American, but has moved to Israel as of 2008. And you know, her wording in this can be a little tough in places. She definitely, it's a blog, so it's not written to be necessarily a news piece. It's not completely unbiased in its views. But that being said, she does detail the main pieces of evidence in a pretty smart way. So I've included it in the links below for your review. We're just going to jump through it very quickly. Of course, the first one is the confession. Very, you know, it's one of those things. If you get someone to confess to a crime, it's a very hard piece of information to not look at or to not take seriously. However, in many of these cases I've looked at, particularly when you get a confession from someone that's incarcerated, they don't always pan out. It's not enough to take them at face value. You have to take them kind of with a grain of salt and have the evidence back up that story to prove or disprove that that confession is actually valid. And I can tell you in this case, there's a lot of pieces of his story that didn't seem to fit. In the links below, you're going to see a couple of links to YouTube videos. I'm not going to go over them here, but one of them shows where they actually took him to the bathroom stall and had him try to escape from it, locked from the inside. And you can see what he does is he puts his arms on each side of the other walls, and he swings his legs up over the front door and then exits out the front, basically out of the front of the stall. Well, I've already, as I've read before on this video, apparently that's not what happened. They found a shoe print that makes it look like the person jumped into stall number 3 and then went out that way. So even looking at that video evidence, compared to the forensics that the police themselves have collected, it doesn't quite fit. Him retelling the story of what he did to that girl doesn't quite fit. The other major thing is they highly suspect the person was left-handed for a few reasons, because of the direction of the cuts, but also they have a police investigator try to recreate escaping the stall. And when he tries to do so with his right foot, he doesn't get his foot in the right place for the marking to happen on the wall between stall 2 and 3. However, when they tell him to do it with his left foot, which to him is first kind of difficult, he even says in the video, I'm right-footed, how am I supposed to do this? But then he does it with his left foot. He does get his foot to line up exactly where it would be. So between the knife cuts and the person seeming to lead with their left foot, it is highly probable that the killer is left-handed, and Zadarov is, of course, right-handed. Exhibit B, the shoe print. We've already talked about that. According to an expert for the FBI, or former FBI, has supposedly written the book on shoe print analysis, also participated in the OJ trial. The shoe print is not valid. You can't even confirm that it's a shoe print, let alone tie it back to a particular make or model. At this point, I can also tell you that Crazy Cat Lady sent me a photo of Zadorov's shoes. They look like a construction worker's shoes. There is paint and all kinds of other material splattered all over them. None of it is blood. No blood was found. And when you think about, oh, well, maybe he cleaned off his shoes, what type of solvent would he use that could literally remove all traces of blood, but leave all that other crap caked on there? And for them to not find any traces on the sole, when, if you take a look at the, like I said, I didn't want to show you the grisliest pictures, but this was an extremely bloody crime scene. I find it really hard to believe that any shoe that stepped in that mess would be able to be completely cleaned at any point. I think that they would definitely find evidence, and according to what I've reviewed, they have found no evidence. They found none of his DNA in the stall. They did find the DNA of other people. They found hair of other girls that were classmates of Tair, once again leading us back to that possible suggestion about it being some form of bullying or something like that. However, this is a public bathroom, or not public, but it's a high school bathroom. There are other girls that are going to use it, so I do think you're going to find evidence of other girls being in there. But for you to find absolutely no evidence of your main suspect in a scene that grisly, very, very tough in my mind, and I find that very, very hard to believe. Exhibit C, she talks about the DNA. Same thing, just none that belonged to Zadorov was found on the crime scene. They also did not find the knife. According to his confession story, he says that he buried it in the floor that he was installing, that I had mentioned at the start. Well, they had someone go and pull all that flooring up, and they have not been able to find that box cutter. So once again, the facts of the investigation are not lining up with the confession, yet for some reason this guy is sitting in jail. And it kind of makes sense to me that now one of the three judges has swayed his opinion. I think it's also worth noting, according to some of the research I did, that one of the other judges was the original trial judge on this. So to get him to overturn his opinion that he has now stated several times as I think this guy is guilty is probably already going to be an uphill battle. However, it appears that the majority rules, so we've got that one other judge that hopefully might be impartial enough to take in some new information and maybe flip this case around. And how exactly would that happen? Well, that brings us to our next link. This is from timesofisrael.com. And according to this was posted just on January 5th, 2016. The court agrees to re-examine conviction in the teen's murder. Essentially, because the last appeal was not a unanimous decision by the judges, in this justice system that leaves another opportunity for them to come back and to try again. So his legal team has been getting together. They've been talking about what went wrong in the previous appeal that they filed. And this is, I believe, this is their last chance to really get it right. So as of when this was written on January 5th, they have 45 days to get all of their paperwork in, to get their argument solid and submitted. So I am expecting that we will have some update to this case, possibly within the next few months, which I'm extremely interested in seeing how this all turns out. It really nags at me. There's a sense of injustice in this. If this guy did it, I don't want him to be free. However, the way that they've told this story and the evidence that is speaking for itself is not lining up. And in that case, isn't that reasonable doubt? It just feels very similar to me as the Stephen Avery case. When do you say the investigators have not done their job? This is not a good enough case. It's weird because if you look at least in our country, how the justice system works, you essentially have everyone being paid by the same sponsor. It's tax money. It's the government that is paying for these services. Everyone is reporting up to the same boss. Does it really do the court system justice, or does it serve their best interests when they make one of their other departments in essentially their same organization look bad? I don't think so. Does that mean that they're always going to cover each other? I would hope not, but in most cases where the line might get a little fuzzy, I believe they're going to err to that they will believe in their own services and resources above outside information. To what point? That is the question, and at least in this case, that point looks like it has been moved way too far. I think they really need to look at this again, and they need to insist that these investigators maybe bring in a whole new investigative team, crack out all this information again, go through it all again. But that confession, quite honestly, any confession that is given after someone is being interviewed intensively for several days in a row, I don't think it should be admissible in court. It's not viable at that point. You have someone that is away from home, living in a cell. That has to mess with your mentality. Are you going to start considering lying at that point just to get out of that situation? There are certain elements of human nature that are going to kick in that you can't deny. But in these cases, they seem to take these things at face value, his confession at face value, even when it doesn't fit. So there's just one more piece of information that I want to review. Unfortunately, we have another piece of information here about her father, and this is really recent news. This is just from January 14th, 2016. They made a synagogue in her honor, and her father, here's a picture of him, made it to the ceremony, and he literally died the next day, which was a day before his birthday. And he had been battling cancer. Here's a quote from him. "It is a good feeling to finally achieve the vision I have had for all these years since the murder, with the completion of this little temple dedicated to the memory of Tair. It is not easy for me, being very ill. I made every effort to make it to this occasion." And literally less than 24 hours later, he passed away. There's also some very touching quotes here from her mother, speaking about now her father is there to protect her and that her mother wants to join them, which I'm sure is something we would all feel. So I just want to once again thank Crazy Cat Lady. She was extremely passionate about getting this covered because of the lack of coverage in the Western media about this, and I can vouch for that. If you search for Tair Rada on YouTube, you will I only found 2 videos that tied to her that had some English subtitling and a bunch of other videos that didn't. This case is not well covered in Western media at all, despite the fact that it's rippling across Israel and has become a big point of contention about their justice system. So Crazy Cat Lady, my hat's off to you. Thank you so much for doing all this hard work. And there's much more information that was sent in to me, and I'm trying to work on a system where I can share that with you, brain scratchers, maybe things that I can't cover in this 30 or 40 minute episode, all the extra details that my brain scratch researchers are doing. Maybe if there's some way I can share that with you. I'm gonna think about that a little bit more. I don't know if it's an addition to my website or something like that, but she sent such good information. I want to get the rest of it out there too. So if nothing else, I'm pretty sure we're going to do an update on this case in the following months as this new trial kicks off. And hopefully this guy can get a fair shake, because to me it seems like that is not the case. I think they really need to look at those leads of the other students and some of the testimony of the other students. If you start researching that information, unfortunately you'll probably have to speak Hebrew or have a friend that does. You're going to hear a bunch of stories that don't seem to make a lot of sense, including girls that say they were in the bathroom about the same time that this supposedly occurred. So there's a lot that I think needs to be reinvestigated here. So that is it for this episode of Brain Scratch. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll catch you next time on the Geek and Dorks channel. Take care.